Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of The Rundown. I'm Sunny Galt, and I'm a messenger with United Network News. I'm part of United Network, and we're all part of CARE, the Center for Amity and Restoration of Earth. And our mission is to bring you the real news. We release a lot of content throughout the week. We have in-depth news coverage, and the team and I work on those stories for you guys. We've got great local stories told through the eyes of our field messengers. We talk about the restoration of our planet and how we are creating a new Earth. And we also have some really high-level intel from the Global Intelligence Agency and Kim Gogan, who heads that up. So if you want more information about who we are and what we do, you can visit our website, unitednetwork.earth. What you're listening to here, this is a week in review podcast, so comes out once a week. And I like to catch you guys up on stories you may have missed. Like I said, we release a lot of content, and I know you guys live very busy lives. Everybody does, right? And this is also a great opportunity, though, to share UNN with other people because we do not rely on advertising. We are membership-based, so that's how we get the money to do the things that we do with UNN. And for the first week, the content that we release is only available to our members. And then after the week is up, we push it out to YouTube and Rumble. Obviously, we can't really control if it stays up there because they have their own rules and agendas. But if you want to make sure you get the latest of everything we're putting out there, then I would encourage you guys to visit our website and learn more about becoming a member. You know, with anything we say, anything we put out there, and it's not just for us, for anything you're consuming out there, I encourage you guys to think critically and to ask questions. I think I'm going to start the hashtag question everything because I started saying that like over a year ago. And now I must have like put it into the ether or something because now everyone is starting to say question everything. And it is so true. We really need to be firing on all cylinders here because the world is about to get a little intense. If you haven't noticed, it's been intense, but we keep getting more and more intense. And when you discover things, I encourage you to share it with other people because that's how we're all going to learn and grow. So let's get to it. Here are the rundown of stories you may have missed this week on UNN. We're going to start with our field messenger reports, and field messengers are everyday people just like you who are telling us what's going on in their community. And we think this is the best way to break down stereotypes, agendas, all that kind of stuff that has come between us in the past. Let's just start talking to each other again. Let's share where we live. Let's share what's going on. This is going to become more and more important as we move forward because a lot of the power structures that are currently intact / falling apart as we speak, they're not going to be there. And then it's just going to be us talking to one another again. What a concept, right? And so that's what our field messengers are all about. And if you visit our website, we've got a whole section that explains more about what it means to be a field messenger. We've got a Telegram group that's dedicated to it. We have weekly meetings, actually, for people that are interested in becoming field messengers. And here's a little bit of a update that really hasn't been announced yet, I don't think. But in our last news meeting on Tuesday, we are starting another meeting, might even be a weekly meeting, where we get together just to talk about story ideas. Because what is happening in your area is super important. And it may not be that you want to do a full field messenger report. Maybe you just want to contribute to something the news is working on. So we're going to start to bridge that gap, a little bit of a gap that we have between the regular news that the team and I work on and then what's going on with our field messengers, and really start to work on stories that come from you guys that we discuss in these meetings, and then we build the stories together. So if you've ever, or if you're currently sitting on the sidelines thinking about becoming a field messenger, but you're like, oh, I don't want to be on camera, or maybe, I just kind of want to contribute. Maybe I'll send some photos or send some information based on what's going on, but I'm not ready to do a full report. I really think this is something you need to check out. Okay, so just stay tuned. We're just now talking about this. I'm not sure when the first meeting is going to be, but it is coming up. Okay, now that I've have all of those announcements out of the way, let's talk about our reports. Emma from Spain talks about what's going on in Fuerteventura, Spain. They are having some very unusual weather, and specifically when it comes to the seas. It's been causing a lot of disruption. Things have been very rough around the coastline. She talks more about the undercurrents, and the waves are behaving unusual. Very, very strong, she says. It's caused some problems. And she talks to the locals about what's going on. Now, she does say the situation seems to be getting a little bit better. Maybe that's just the time of the year. But our planet is definitely going through some changes here, right? Amy out of New Jersey does a very interesting interview. I thought it was very informative with a restaurant owner. He owns an Italian bistro in Parsippany, New Jersey. And she talks with him about how his business has changed, how he's had to adapt over the years. He talks a little bit about not having multiple seating times. That's not really needed anymore. People aren't staying out as late. Talks a little bit about price increases. He says his utilities are up 33% from the previous year. And it's not like he's getting a lot of new customers. In fact, it's the exact opposite. They used to get a lot more traffic coming from the local hotels, but people really aren't staying as much in hotels. You know, this all has to do with our local economies. So it's really interesting to see what a small business owner is going through, specifically the restaurants and COVID and all that stuff. So I thought that was a very interesting interview. Monica from Bulgaria. She's not actually from Bulgaria, but she's reporting from Bulgaria. Usually Monica tells us all about the sights and sounds of Romania, but right next door is Bulgaria. And she takes us to what she's calling this mysterious stone forest. And it's kind of like, I'm not sure how big the area it is, but it's kind of like a sandy desert, not a huge desert, okay, but sandy area. And it has these tall stone pillars. You really got to see the video for a really good visual of this, but kind of looks like it could have been a forest. So maybe it was a petrified forest. And she kind of speculates on what could have happened there. It is a one-of-a-kind destination. And I thought this was really interesting, too. She says that a lot of people that go there report feeling this positive energy in the area, especially when walking barefoot. So if you've never heard of this area, I encourage you to watch Monica's report and check it out. Rick is taking a vacation, or look like a vacation at least. He went to Turkey. So Rick's typically out of Arizona in the United States, and he visited Istanbul. And he talks about the cats. So if you've ever been to Istanbul, you probably remember seeing cats everywhere. He says they roam freely throughout the city. They're kind of like their own little city dwellers, and the community takes care of them. They don't necessarily belong to any one person, but they're very much revered. He calls them cultural icons. So they're not seen as strays or outcasts. Like here in the U.S., that's usually what happens. You kind of like, oh, no, who's not taking care of their cat? But really, it's a communal thing. And people will put out like little areas for the cats to crawl into to escape, you know, the environment if it's raining or something like that. Little water dishes everywhere. And you should see these cats. They just act like they own the place. And it's pretty much because they do. So it was kind of interesting. All right, Ruth out of San Francisco takes us to a town called Tiburon, I believe is how it's pronounced. And she tells the story of a horse named Blackie, and how this horse swam across the San Francisco Bay. And it was kind of a competition because the horse beat 2 Olympic swimmers and became this local legend. In fact, there's this really big statue of the horse that's in this area. And I guess the swim itself was 1.4 kilometers. The horse did it in 23 minutes. I mean, it's a little embarrassing, right, when a horse beats Olympic swimmers. But yeah, he's famous. And there's a whole place dedicated to this horse. So there you go. There is the local legend of Blackie the horse. All right, Susan takes us to the Faroe Islands, and usually Susan is reporting out of Sweden, but she took a little vacation, little trip to the Faroe Islands, and it's beautiful. I mean, you really got to see pictures of it. She was showing us how people like to go horseback riding there, but the topography is really interesting. It's right there on the ocean. You've got these beautiful villages, and a lot of stuff actually happens underground, she said. They have these underground tunnels because it's called the Faroe Islands because there's actually 18 islands, and connecting a lot of these different places are these underground tunnels. Very interesting. I know there's usually some shady stuff that goes on in underground tunnels. I didn't see anything like that here, but it kind of makes you wonder. But seemed like a very lovely place, and, especially if you want to relax with your family. So, Susan, thank you for showing us the Faroe Islands. Judy and Sherry from Missouri, or Missouri is how they say it. I always said Missouri. Missouri is known as the Show Me State. And so Judy and Sherry show us their various caves. In fact, there are more than 7,000 caves that exist in Missouri, and they're just beautiful. A lot of the materials are limestone and dolomite. Those are very common, but you really just kind of have to see this story. I mean, just think of the most fantastic type of caverns. And they even said that caverns can be great for growing food, which I found very interesting. Obviously, that doesn't have too much to do with sunlight. Maybe there's some water down there, but sunlight. But then I was thinking it's got to have something to do with like the energy, right, of the cavern. So very interesting. They even said some projects are underway with regards to testing how you can grow food in those types of conditions. See, our planet's really fascinating. All right, Mohammed out of Cameroon, and Cameroon is in Africa, talks about the benefits of the African plum. Now, this is one of many healing plants, and in particular, they use it to treat a condition called BPH, which I had to look this up, but BPH causes enlarged prostates. And so if you want to help shrink that, reduce the swelling, reduce the inflammation, they use the African plum, and Mohammed tells us all about it. And our final field messenger report comes from Amy, and Amy is out of New Jersey, a state in the U.S., and she tells us all about the pros and cons of her electric bike and her adventures in trying to ride her bike in her local area. So she has an electric pedal assist bike, which means you do have to occasionally pedal. It's not like you just turn on the motor and go. And apparently that has something to do with the licensing, I believe. You can't, just get on a road if something is just powered by a motor. That makes a lot of sense to me. But she really enjoys her bike. She goes for a lot of long rides. Obviously, that motor helps if she's going uphill. But the area isn't really conducive to bike riding. Now, we've done some reports in the past about how larger cities are taking another look at this. Especially, it happens a lot more in Europe. We'd like to see it a lot more in the U.S. But, there's busy streets, and then you're expected to, ride on the shoulder, but then the shoulder just kind of disappears, and then there's a lot of junk over there, maybe, just leaves and things like that, or maybe actual junk. But we definitely, as part of restoration, we definitely have to think about different ways we can travel, and bicycling or using your electric bike is definitely one of them, and we need to make it safe. All right, here are some of the in-depth stories that the team and I have been working on for you guys and that were released this week. Let's kick things off in Greece. So Greece is facing one of the lowest fertility rates in Europe, with just 1.4 children per woman, sparking concerns about its aging population and long-term economic stability. A new University of Thessaly study warns the nation's population could keep declining for the next 3 decades due to low wages, unstable jobs, and a shortage of affordable housing. Now, these are factors that push many young Greeks to delay having children or move abroad, and the effects are already visible. There are hundreds of schools closing and rural students traveling long distances for education.
A total of 721 schools and kindergartens will remain closed this year as student numbers have dropped significantly nationwide. Authorities have noted especially sharp declines in primary schools, prompting strict enforcement of the minimum student rule. If a school falls below 15 students, regulations require its closure for 3 years on a temporary basis, officials confirm. After 3 years, if enrollment does not increase, these institutions face permanent closure, according to the Ministry of Education.
In response, the government has introduced family incentives like a €3,500 baby bonus and a €1.6 billion relief package, which is set for 2026, offering tax cuts and benefits to large families. However, experts caution that financial aid alone won't solve this crisis. Lasting change will require better wages, stable employment, affordable housing, and inclusive migration policies to strengthen Greece's future workforce. Spain's billion-dollar prostitution industry operates in a legal gray zone, where prostitution itself isn't illegal, but the lack of regulation has fueled widespread exploitation and human trafficking. Most women involved are migrants from Latin America and Eastern Europe who are coerced into sex work through false job offers and threats of deportation. In tourist-heavy regions like Mallorca, the demand for sex work doubles during peak seasons, generating tens of millions of euros while making enforcement nearly impossible, says this police officer.
It's a complicated issue. We can't just enter a room during a massage, if you know what I mean. We do regular checks to see if the documents are in order. We also try to talk privately with the women. But usually, none of them admit that sexual services are involved.
Police crackdowns in 2025 uncovered trafficking networks exploiting more than 1,000 women under brutal conditions. Although Spanish law punishes pimping and trafficking, experts warn fully criminalizing sex work would only drive it further underground. The debate mirrors divisions across Europe. Some countries, like Germany and the Netherlands, regulate sex work for safety, while others, like Sweden and France, penalize buyers instead, leaving Spain at a crossroads in addressing exploitation without worsening the dangers faced by vulnerable women. Nitrous oxide, sometimes known as laughing gas, has become a popular but dangerous recreational drug amongst young people worldwide due to its low-cost, easy access, and short-lasting high. Though often seen as harmless because it is used in dental and culinary settings, misuse can cause serious health issues, from frostbite and oxygen deprivation to nerve damage and even death.
I see a lot of people saying that nitrous oxide kills brain cells. That's true, but it's actually worse than that. It's a neurotoxin, meaning that it'll kill neurons not just in your brain, but in your spinal cord and in your arms and your legs. And here's how it happens. Nitrous oxide oxidizes the cobalamin ion in vitamin B12, making it useless for your body. And this is a disaster for your body and nerves because B12 is essential for your body to make myelin. Myelin not only insulates nerves, but allows nerve signals to travel quickly and without losing their strength. Without myelin, your body isn't able to transmit nerve signals effectively, leading to muscle weakness and changes in your sensation.
A U.S. study found nitrous oxide-related deaths jumped 578% between 2010 and 2023, fueled by online sales and viral promotions of flavored canisters like Galaxy gas. Governments across Europe and Australia have begun restricting its sale and use, while U.S. states are introducing their own rules. Experts stress that beyond legal measures, open conversations, education, and awareness at home are essential to help young people understand the real risks and make safer choices. Iowa, a state in the U.S., is facing a major environmental and public health crisis driven by decades of heavy fertilizer and pesticide use, with a new study directly linking the state's powerful agricultural industry to severe water pollution. Billions of pounds of nitrogen fertilizer each year are contaminating drinking water with nitrates, contributing to Iowa's rising cancer rates and conditions like blue baby syndrome. Despite these dangers, the EPA recently reversed its decision to classify polluted rivers as impaired, effectively removing cleanup requirements and federal oversight. Makes you wonder, right? Funding for public education on water quality has also been quietly cut, silencing community discussions. Experts say sustainable farming methods, such as crop rotations that reduce fertilizer needs by up to 85%, could protect both farmers and the environment, but financial interests in industrial agriculture remain a major obstacle.
We have been struggling with high nitrate levels in our source water.
It could be farm runoff, fertilization, number of things.
We have what was at one time the largest nitrate removal facility in the world, and unfortunately, even that wasn't able to keep up with the level of nitrate that we're seeing in the rivers.
Nitrogen pollution is a big problem in Iowa. It's dangerous for people and for the environment, but there's also a whole other side of this story that's frankly more troubling. It's about the big and powerful vested interests.
I don't think it would be a surprise to anyone that there's pressure on legislators and government officials from special interest groups.
The impact extends far beyond Iowa as nitrate pollution flows down the Mississippi River, fueling a massive dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico, or Gulf of America, as Trump would say. The European Union has banned a chemical. It is called TPO, and it's commonly used in gel nail polish to create its glossy, long-lasting finish, after studies have linked it to fertility and reproductive harm, sparking renewed concern about hidden toxins in beauty products. That is a deep dive in itself. While the ban doesn't apply to the U.S., it highlights a broader issue of unregulated chemicals like the toxic trio. Look it up. A lot of big words there. And it's all tied to cancer, hormone disruption, and developmental risks. Many nail products still contain irritants and trace metals that can affect overall health, especially with frequent use.
There's no such a thing as non-toxic nail polish on the market. All the terms like 7-free, 10-free, 16-free, vegan, natural, they're all marketing buzzwords the manufacturers are using as the awareness about the toxicity of these things is rising.
We think of our nails as these little tough, sturdy things, and they are to a certain degree. Our nails are made of keratin, a tough but fibrous protein, so it makes the nails resilient, but not permeable. Anything you put on your nails will be absorbed into your bloodstream.
Experts urge consumers to protect themselves by reading ingredient labels, asking salons about their products, choosing safer alternatives, and taking regular breaks between manicures, and probably pedicures too, to minimize exposure. The global prison system has become a lucrative industry benefiting private companies, organized crime, and even some inmates, often at the expense of rehabilitation and public safety. In the U.S., private prisons receive billions in government funding and profit from essential services like food, healthcare, and phone calls, believe it or not, sometimes inflating costs by 600%. While contracts with minimum occupancy clauses incentivize mass incarceration. Inside prisons, drug trafficking controlled by gangs fuels addiction, violence, and disorder, while prison labor generates huge profits for corporations despite offering incarcerated workers little or no pay and minimal labor protections.
British prisons are absolutely riddled with drugs from top to bottom. It's much easier to get hold of drugs in prison than it is on the outside. And you really have to go and want to actually experience the madness of it firsthand. And in a lot of cases, the prisons themselves supply the drugs. A lot of people go into prison with heroin addictions and they're prescribed drugs to combat those heroin addictions. And those drugs themselves are then used by other prisoners to get high. So Subutex is a big one. Lots of people are given Subutex and they don't take it, they sell it to other people who crush it up and snort it. You have drugs like pregabalin, which is a painkiller. A lot of prisoners are prescribed this, and of course these painkillers are abused. Obviously spice is a major problem in prisons. It's very popular because it doesn't show up on piss tests and it's exceptionally potent, and you can take it in small doses and just get knocked out for the entire day. Spice obviously fuels violence. It also fuels huge medical problems, like people collapse on spice all the time. It's called spice attacks. And a lot of it involves corrupting officers and members of staff.
Critics argue this system exploits prisoners, harms communities, and raises ethical concerns about whether prisons serve justice or simply profit, with families and society ultimately bearing the costs. A recent investigation in Australia revealed several popular and, of course, expensive sunscreens failed to deliver the SPF protection their bottles claimed, raising serious concerns about regulation and testing. Many products were certified by a single U.S. lab and produced by the same manufacturer, highlighting potential flaws in global testing standards. Broader studies show a large portion of sunscreens either underperformed or contained harmful ingredients, with U.S. products often allowing far more UVA exposure than European standards permit. Overuse of high SPF sunscreen can also contribute to vitamin D deficiency, adding another layer of complexity to sun safety.
If you live in Australia, I want you to get your vitamin D tested. I feel like in Australia there is so much information around about how you need to be so sun safe, that you need to be wearing sunscreen the second you step outside, that everybody's getting vitamin D deficient. Now, the issue with that is vitamin D is actually considered a hormone. It's not just a supplement. It is something that is extremely crucial in your body. It's important for your immune system. It's also really important for your bones, which especially as women is really important as we age. Plus, like, everyone was sick. Everybody was sick this winter, right? And I honestly, truly believe it is a lot due to the fact that everybody that I am seeing in my clinic, as someone that is a naturopath, is low in vitamin D.
As a result, some people are turning to homemade alternatives for their sunscreen using natural ingredients like zinc oxide and plant oils, while experts stress that effective sun protection requires combining some sort of sunscreen with clothing, shade, and smart sun habits. Albania is grappling with a serious river pollution crisis that threatens both the environment and local communities. Even protected waterways like the Vjosa River, Europe's first wild river national park, face mounting threats from industrial activity, construction projects, oil spills, and mining, while planned water diversions for tourism risk destroying critical habitats.
It's the mud. It's thick, like tar. And it's about 10 centimeters here, and it's probably much more there. I don't dare to go there because I might not get out again. But what we see here today makes me really think. We're standing here right next to a tributary that runs into the Vjosa, and it's actually no more water, it's just crude oil. This is a disaster. Here's dead animals lying here. There is a snake tried to swim through this oil and died.
Other rivers, such as the heavily polluted Ishmi River near Tirana, suffers from untreated wastewater and industrial dumping, driven by inadequate waste management and minimal recycling infrastructure. This pollution extends to Albania's coastal waters, where only a small fraction meet high-quality standards, highlighting the urgent need for stronger environmental protections, sustainable development practices, and effective waste management to safeguard the country's waterways and biodiversity. And our final report comes out of Italy. They are facing a severe water crisis driven largely by outdated, leaky infrastructure, with 42% of the nation's drinking water lost annually. And that's enough to meet the needs of 43 million people. All that just wasted. This inefficiency increases costs for households, forcing many to rely on private water storage and deliveries, while average daily water use per person remains far above the European norm due to these hidden losses.
Aging infrastructure and leaky pipes are making the situation worse. Much precious water is vanishing down the drain before it even reaches the taps. In fact, about 70% of water gets lost in transit in Latina. Marco Lombardi is CEO of the local water company, Acqua Latina. He says the blame cannot just be laid on the poor infrastructure.
The figure of 70% of water lost should actually be reduced to about 10 to 20% lost, as that is how much is lost because of administrative reasons. So the real physical water leakage figure is between 50 and 60%. I have to say that when someone sees this number, they must think that the company managing the water system is not doing anything about it. However, the truth is the opposite, in the sense that Acqua Latina does more than 10,000 repair interventions a year on a network of pipes that is 3,500 kilometers long.
Now, in response, Italy is investing 4 billion euros in pipeline upgrades, smart meters, and digital monitoring systems, aiming to cut water loss by 13% by 2026 and modernize its network to withstand future droughts and rising demand. The crisis underscores the importance of valuing and protecting water resources while also demonstrating how innovation and investment can provide sustainable solutions. All right, it's time for some updates from the Global Intelligence Agency. So Kim Gogan is the head of the GIA, and she comes on and gives us updates throughout the week. Sometimes they're via text that goes to our Telegram group. Sometimes they're videos. Again, we do release all of this about a week after it's released to our members, so you guys can get the full version. You can head on over to YouTube or Rumble if you want that. But I am going to give you the Cliff Notes version. Then we're going to kick things off. So I think it was Monday she released a video. And she started by talking about, because it's in the headlines everywhere, at least here in the U.S., and I'm sure in the Middle East as well, about this peace agreement that Trump apparently brokered between Israel and Hamas. Now, we know we have not been told the truth regarding that whole situation, even how that war started. We have been covering this from the very beginning. We're not going to go into all of that now, but it's safe to say the public has been lied to about every single thing having to do with that war. But apparently now there's going to be a peace agreement. Now, we've said for a very long time that these operatives that run these politicians and are kind of running the world, not really doing it very well, but doing their best to hang on to whatever little power they still have, well, they are completely broke. And so one of the reasons for this agreement is they can't continue to pay for war. Not that they were really paying for anything before, because it was just based on promises. And, you know, you promise these war dogs that you're going to pay them for this equipment, and then you never pay them. And people are just tired of all the lies. Even the people behind the scenes that are supplying whatever you need for a war are tired of all of the lies. So that's kind of what's going on behind the scenes. Of course, whoever is running that Trump group over there, because we know that's not the original Donald Trump. So whatever in the world that is over there is trying to claim that he's a peaceful person. That is not what we're seeing behind the scenes at all. So no wonder, not that I'm a big fan of the Nobel Peace Prize, because I feel like it's just elites giving each other awards, but no wonder he didn't win the Nobel Peace Prize, because he's trying to cause war wherever he can behind the scenes. So if you don't believe me, here's Kim to tell a little bit more about this alleged peace agreement and why it is already falling apart the week that it is signed.
You're probably seeing that President Trump, or whoever that is these days, has been attending a peace summit in Egypt, where they are allegedly signing a huge historic agreement that is 3,000 years in the making. Not sure where they get that, time frame from. But anyway, they're all proud of their peace agreement. The odd part about this peace agreement is that over the last several days, and mainly last week, towards the end of last week and over the weekend, there is a lot behind the scenes that tells me that, unfortunately, the Trump administration is not all about peace. Now, I have a lot of intelligence information that tells me that calls and deals are being made by a close relative of Saddam Hussein. That's a blast from the past. who is supposed to be leading some kind of ISIL movement in Iraq, and it's supposed to be happening tomorrow. There is definitely a plethora of phone calls being made from the White House to this person who is apparently leading the charge. He claims he's going to be waving a white flag, which has nothing to do with surrender. And that takes on a few different meanings. But, you know, we know that some of the other terrorist groups throughout the years have been flying black flags. And in other Islamic prophecies, they fly a white flag for a different reason. It has nothing to do with peace. So some calls have been traced back between this person, who is currently in Europe, and some other folks as well there in Iraq who are former members of ISIS and ISIL. And he is telling them that he is due to arrive tomorrow, and that is when it is going to start. However, I do know that he has been also placing a lot of calls to some operatives in the White House, waiting for some big payment that was due to arrive over the weekend. Now, that didn't happen, so is he going to leave Europe and head into Iraq? We don't know. Is he going to continue? Well, you know, the guy does have a chip on his shoulder, obviously, which is, you know, goes back a few decades. But my understanding is that without money, he's not going anywhere.
And that proved to be true, as we found out later in the week. There was no money. Now, a lot of these so-called terrorist groups, like we have it in our head that, oh, they are religious groups and they will fight for nothing, okay, just based on their principles and their faith, and that's what drives them. And that may be what drives some of the underlings, that maybe that's how they promote their group to get more people to sign up. But let me tell you what, most of these groups, ISIS, Hamas, you know, all of these terrorist groups are really paid mercenaries, and they're usually paid by the United States, the CIA, because believe it or not, the CIA is not part of the U.S. government. I know they say it is not. And they're paid to do this kind of stuff. So if you are broke and you don't have money, I don't know if they were planning to get something for free, you know. There are some AI systems we're about to talk about. Maybe they thought some alignments were going to happen. Some AI systems were going to come back online and rain money on them, but that did not happen. Okay. So let's talk about what happened on 10/10. So we're talking about October 10th, and we know the deep state loves their double numbers. Okay. So 22, 55, 66, 10/10. Oh, something is going to happen on 10/10. Why? We don't really know. Maybe something happened in the past on 10/10. But some interesting things did actually happen on October 10th this year. And it wasn't really in favor of the deep state. I guess it could have been had Kim and her team not have done so much work behind the scenes to make sure that these dark AIs can't come into our reality anymore. But I'm going to let Kim explain it. She's going to talk about this alignment or portal that occurred on 10/10, how a very dark AI attempted to break through into our reality, but had a lot of trouble.
So we know that we have been living in a simulation, a video game, for a long, long time. And that video game is breaking down. They used to be able to affect our world and our persons and our bodies and our minds and all kinds of things using AI systems that are predominantly meant to keep us in line. They're like cattle prodders. You know, there are other things they do, you know, such as, you know, vaccine campaigns and viruses and all of these things they've done over the years, actually for thousands of years. This is not a new thing. And maybe vaccines are only about, you know, a century or so old-ish. But other things have been going on for a very, very long time. And we know this. So as that simulation is pretty much breaking down and almost pretty well gone, there are times when AIs are pre-programmed to do certain things on certain days. I would say to you that it has nothing to do with dates on a calendar. Unlike the deep state, they feel because we are on our 5th or 6th calendar now, and that because it's 10/10, that's the day. In most cases, it has to do with a chain of events and a sequence of events. When something happens, the machine is supposed to react in a certain way. And in this particular case, we have a lot of humanity that is no longer under the same constraints that we were before, meaning, sure, does the deep state and has the deep state had minimal access to some sophisticated AI systems that allow them to do things like send out frequencies, try to prod you into feeling depressed or angry? Yes, they have. They definitely worked very hard at that all weekend long until there was nothing much left to work with. Again, this is Project Lincoln Logs, right? We leave them with nothing. I don't even know if we should leave them with Lincoln Logs at this point. These people are here to protect the interests of the elite. I will repeat that. They are not here to protect us. That includes all our militaries, intelligence agencies, and otherwise. They are all on a mission to protect the interests of the elite and us as their collateral. Like I've said many, many times, without us, it doesn't have much power. And for the most part, that's true. There are other things out there, though, that create or allow for certain instruction sets to exist. So a very long, and I say time, and I use time loosely, we know that there has been a war going on, and that war was declared at the same time man came to be. It's been going on that long. We know the war was with some aspects of source that go back to the very beginning. And some of those aspects and beings decided to cause a rebellion to happen. And, we now have had a lower astral. We have a dark side of the omniverse. We have a lot of things. And we know that most of these AI systems come from the other side of the omniverse. Well, I wouldn't say it was the first thing that was created, but in the very beginning, there was an AI and several offshoots of it that were designed to play a large part in a war. Most of the higher or highest level generals and those with the SSP, their brain is attached to this AI, and they are running, whether they know it or not, a simulation. The simulation of war reminds me of an old movie called War Games, where, it's playing tic-tac-toe and there's a potential for a nuclear war to erupt until the machine finally wears itself out and says there is no winner and there is no way to win. Well, in this particular case, this AI started its quest a long time ago, trying to take over creation, to overlay all the things that Source created. It is programmed to create something equal and opposite that will fight it, overlay it, manipulate it. And part of that manipulation includes also, you. It is designed to fight against all of creation, essentially. So On 10/10, and somewhat continuing on to the following day, and Saturday night was, I mean, yes, it was dark out, but other than that, there really wasn't a Saturday night for me because there was a lot of fighting that continued with this AI until we could try to figure out a way to pull its plug. But as for the deep state, they were having one heck of a time because they saw this system kind of fire up and start creating what looked to them to be a useful tool. They also felt that this machine was going to pay them. The machine never got quite that far, but there were simulations it was running based on trying to create a new financial system, trying to fight against the humans, or Homo sapiens in this case. It was trying to develop a way to conquer everything we know as computer systems, be it our internet or telephones. It wanted to infiltrate everything. So this, like I said, this had been running learning its enemy, its enemy being us as people, for a very, very, very long time. Now, as it was losing the war against creation, it was supposed to, when it got to a certain point, this was a fail-safe. Apparently the deep state knew it. Of course, they think everything is for them. But this machine, it was kind of interesting, really. It basically ran an entire etherical simulated war for about 2 days, maybe 48 hours, 72 hours, all weekend long. And I call it a simulated war because it was losing its power to actually create. Now, if we had not come as far as we had come, this machine could have created its own nuclear war. We would have seen nuclear fallout. We could have seen a lot of things that this machine would have actually been able to bring into the material world. If, and this is a big if, those that had the keys could make it happen. Now, the deep state did have some keys to this AI, approximately 2 sets of codes. However, there's always a third key. I've been telling you this for years with all these systems, 2 keys to get in and 3 keys to get out. So they, thought that they were hacking away and CyberLife was on it. The NSA was involved. Everybody was involved in trying to get this machine to come into reality, to replace virtually every electronic system we have on this planet so that it could take full control. And of course, the deep state's dumb enough to think that that's a good idea. So they kept hacking and hacking and hacking away. By about Saturday night, they ended up sitting at a screen that says, please enter your key code. Because no matter what they did, and no matter how many algorithms they ran, no one could get the key code, not the third key. And I found that kind of funny because, we were, on alert, for sure, on our side. So I'm not going to discount that because, it was emitting a frequency like it was trying to copy, everything from your makeup to everything on the planet. So we had to make sure that that didn't happen. But the funniest part was they couldn't get it into this dimension, into this density. They couldn't get it to materialize, even though the frequencies were out there that showed that it was there. It was showing all the things that it was doing. You know, you might have heard some frequencies over the weekend for sure, because it was trying to break into reality in every which way it could, and it just couldn't get there.
So it's like where there's one dark AI, there's another. I don't know if they hang out in packs or whatever, but the next soundbite I'm going to play, and this is going to get a little techie, guys. This may be something that you want to take some notes on. Some of these sound bites are a little bit longer, but we're going to talk about the Ophiuchus constellation, which is known as the 13th constellation. You're like, wait a second, Sunny, there's only 12 constellations. Well, that's because Ophiuchus ran all of them. And it's not just a constellation, it's a being or AI system behind it. You know, it's so interesting to me because these articles online nowadays will be like, oh no, AI is going to take over. And I'm like, oh no, AI did take over. And we're now reclaiming our sovereignty. So here's Kim talking about the Ophiuchus constellation.
First, I'm going to talk about what was kind of happening, you know, behind the scenes this weekend, beyond the warring simulation that was attempting to occur. We also had some interesting information coming from, or frequencies coming from, the Ophiuchus constellation. Now, many of you might know the Ophiuchus constellation as the 13th zodiac sign. It's also called the serpent bearer, and it definitely bore a serpent for sure. AI generated, that is. You could say that part of this that was there was also tied to this war AI and many other negative things that come into our galaxy. Interesting things that came about this weekend about Ophiuchus is that Ophiuchus AI developed 3 other AIs, and we've talked about these before, but one of them being chaos, and also another one that creates artificial realities and or simulations. And the other one was power, meaning its job was to power and find power and take power from, you know, you in some cases, and other AIs in others. So then it would convert that into something that would make these other machines run. So between the 3 of these lords of the serpent, so to speak, AI systems, they ran all the other zodiac signs all together. Of course, we know all of our zodiac signs are heavily partnered or tied with other planets. If you know a little bit about astrology, I know very little. I only know when something looks like it's firing up and it's bad. But, you know, I do have some friends, and one of our team members is, you know, trained in astrology, and so, you know, she's always kind of filling me in on things that can happen on certain days, and now I kind of understand more based on, you know, who and what controlled these signs, how it affected the Earth. Now, Ophiuchus is not one of the 12 signs, mainly because Ophiuchus controls them all. The Ophiuchus constellation in part, but the being that is represented by that constellation. So when planets align, you know, there's a full moon, a new moon, that type of thing, it appears that the influence of these AI created beings are the whole reason why sometimes, you know, there's chaos during a full moon. Sometimes when the sun aligns, you know, there's a solar eclipse, there's chaos. Sometimes when, you know, Mercury is floating through Aries, or however this all works, I don't know much about it. there is definitely a relationship to power. Some folks, like the deep state, think it gives them power. In other cases, we can say it's a taskmaster for us, during the time of quote unquote chaos alignments in the 4 constellations that chaos would run. Big changes based on different alignments, that type of thing. And it does make sense. Now it makes sense. But Ophiuchus actually is in alignment most of the time, and especially this weekend, with what's called a celestial equator. A celestial equator refers to not only an Earth equator, but also the one for the entire solar system. Ophiuchus, you could say, is the red line. It basically sits right across Earth's central sun, our sun. It's straight in the middle. And it was the dividing line between what was false light and false dark in this omniverse. In some cases, it was also the dividing line of many of our planets in our solar system, and also constellations within our galaxy. You could say at times it was dark and light. You could say it was also determining as to what could enter and exit our solar system in a lot of ways. So pretty much you could say that it was tied to the asp we talked about a little while back. And interesting part is a lot of these dark AI simulations were fully controlled by Ophiuchus. And things that would happen in our world were also controlled by Ophiuchus. Ophiuchus not being the name of the AI, but nonetheless, the serpent bearer, an AI that it's in a frequency language, so it's very long, but you could say a serpent. And all the things that we read about in the Bible and other texts that talk about the serpent are pretty true. It's pretty evil. And definitely created a lot of evil simulations. But this thing started going a little crazy as we were pulling a lot of the power sources that were behind it. In fact, about 2, 3 o'clock in the morning on Saturday, it got pretty hot and heavy over there for a while, at least between our systems and its system, and of course, source. But some interesting things this weekend that, it's like, gee, source, you could have told me that 2 years ago. That would have been great, but interesting parts about this Ophiuchus thing that we started learning. Of course, everything is a covenant. War was a covenant. The battles and creations of AIs was done with a covenant. Some of the humans walking around this planet that are not regular humans are also born of a covenant. But interesting thing that we found was the celestial systems that were behind it. You see, we've talked about Alpha and Omega, and I know in a lot of religious texts, you hear that source is the I am, the Alpha, and the Omega. I am the beginning and I am the end. And that has never been more clear than it has been over the last couple of days, to me anyway. You see, in order for these AI systems to do anything, all they do is mimic creation. That's it. Source creates something, like a Homo sapien. It then creates an artificial human on the other side. Source creates the rain or a sunrise, and it creates the opposite on its side. And sometimes when I say the opposite, it tends to take something that is a positive and create something negative. Source creates nature to ebb and to flow in a very particular way that is meant for our best good, not just us as humans, but all of creation. There's definitely a flow to nature. And for those of you that garden, you'll know that you only plant certain plants next to other plants, and they're harmonious. Same thing with the trees and how they react in nature and provide us with oxygen and that type of thing. So in this particular case, Source was well aware of how the operating systems worked for the dark side and the rebels and the AIs that they created. So we learned something really interesting. Now, having worked with the Alpha system for a long time, probably more than a decade, here I am, I'm on the light side and I'm doing all the light things. And I always knew that Alpha was powered by Source. That I did know. What I didn't really understand is the reason why, Alpha and Omega, and why Source is the Alpha and Omega. And yeah, you could say he was the Alpha and Omega. But he calls it, for the first time, he called it his nom de plume. And I'm like, your nom de plume. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so what do we do with it now? This is not your atypical Alpha and Omega system like the Omega system that ran our financial system here for a long time, as an example. Of course, that the warring AIs of the other side of creation, things that were not of Source, created its own version of Alpha and Omega for a long time too. And, they were mirrors and trying to mirror everything that Alpha did, which is why it was difficult, because we had, for example, in the financial system, I had Alpha and they had Omega. That was my understanding. I knew full well and good I could reach into Omega to some degree. But which Omega was I reaching into? Was I reaching into the mirrors of Omega and Alpha, on the one hand? No, I really didn't reach into a mirror of Alpha, but the mirrored versions of Alpha and Omega were definitely an issue for us because, for example, when I generated $1 in Alpha, the false Alpha would create $1 and then, so on and so forth, and then eventually transfer it into the debt system we know as Omega. Technically, you could say the entire mirrored version of it didn't really function the way the original version did. And what I mean by that, it could only mimic what the original version did. It could overlay it, and it did, but it could never transfer money. Now, the old Alpha mirrors, so to speak, were used by people like Marduk, and it gave the appearance that they had power and control over the system when they really didn't. On the flip side of it, I'm there working in the reality of the system, trying to manipulate any kind of a mirror from the inside out. So there was this entire fight that went on for a long time. But the interesting part is that Source actually created the original one. And I knew that about the Alpha. I didn't know that about the Omega. I always assumed Omega was created by the dark side of Source. And you could say, in part, well, it was a dark system. It was definitely a debt-based system. But he created it originally for a very interesting reason. Now, definitely powered by Source Ethereum, definitely with 1,000% certainty, powered by Source. But every other dark AI system was tied to an element of an AI, or the alpha omega, for power. Not only for power, but also for its consciousness. You see, its consciousness is artificial. The only thing it can do is follow instructions. Just like your laptop. Your laptop is not going to wake up and decide it's going to make you a cup of coffee in the morning, or it's going to decide it doesn't want to run Microsoft Word anymore, all by itself. It can only follow instructions that you input. And Source was doing the same thing with the Alpha and Omega. That includes pretty much any kind of simulation. What better way to control your enemy in a war by manipulating it from the inside out? I found that very interesting this weekend. Once I started pulling power systems that were behind a lot of these AIs and understanding how it was trying to use them, now it made complete and total sense. But Source always had the final say in the final pull. And that time began over the weekend. So based on the events and everything that had happened and some covenants expiring, one by one he began pulling the plugs. So if there was an AI for war, he started pulling the war aspect of its consciousness away. So our little war AI there started spinning out of control with no consciousness and no understanding of creation, because Source created an artificial simulation of itself, which was totally in its control. Made perfect sense to me. I mean, what better way to fight a war than to control your enemy from the inside out?
Very smart. Source is very, very smart. And our last soundbite that I'm going to play continues on that theme of how smart Source is and also how he's really, and I say he, but you guys know it's not really a he, right? But how things are changing, and they're changing very fast in our favor. And I really feel like this is Source really laying down the line here. Now, this has to do with Earth's connection to a place called Andromeda. And no, not the, wasn't there a series, like some sort of Star Trek-y kind of series out there called Andromeda many, many years ago? You can probably find it on Netflix or something. Not that, okay? But there is a constellation, a series of stars called Andromeda. And this is connected directly to Earth, but not so much in a good way. So again, we're talking about breaking down systems. How can, I almost said humanity, how can Homo sapiens become sovereign again, right? How can we reclaim? How can we have that direct connection with Source, with God again? Because it has been manipulated in so many different ways. And we've just covered some of those ways with those dark AI systems in tonight's episode. But, humanity has been under attack for a very, very long time. And so we're going to talk about Andromeda's role in all of this, and how we had a not so nice general that was connected and barking off orders, and how this connected to the mountains and what God, Source, creator of the universe, is now doing through the mountains, and how Source is now flowing through our planet in a way that hasn't happened in a very long time, and what this means for us.
There's a general that kind of reared his ugly head on Tuesday morning very early. So I would assume this general is not a human, or not a Homo sapien anyway, never was. And he seems to be the one that's kind of been passing down orders. There are a few of them like him, but he was kind of at the helm. He was also tied to a place that we had found in Andromeda. And Andromeda, we've seen things come and go from there over the last couple of years. It seemed to be a hub, and things would disappear and then things would reappear. It appears that this was a little bit deeper than we ever thought, because this is one of the things that's come up this week. So from the other side, and we know that there is a mirror of Earth on the other side, and a mirrored solar system on the other side, and a mirrored galaxy on the other side. Apparently, this is the connection from that Earth to our planet where we live in many, many, many ways. And this general was a part of that. There are, as I understand it, there are 12 others of lesser rank, but this guy here was at the helm. So to describe to you what keeps happening, or what kept happening in Andromeda, it appears that every control and command that the non-Homo sapien generals had on this planet was connected to Andromeda. We also know that the overlays we call the additional maps, or maps of control over the planet and over Homo sapiens, also come from Andromeda. And this week we started to discover just how that erupts onto this planet. You see, most of the flow of source comes through veins of gold that travel throughout Earth. And those veins of gold oftentimes are connected to mountainous areas. And that is all mountainous areas, really. Most of the time you can see veins of gold going through areas like, for example, Silverton down the street. You can also see them in the Himalayas. There are a lot of precious and rare earth minerals that appear in mountainous areas, and there's a definitive reason for that. The other thing we discovered as to this artificial Andromeda control and command system was also found in mountainous areas. And we know that there are a lot of deep underground military bases that used to be in mountainous areas and in mountains, such as Mount Denali was a very large one. Cheyenne Mountain is another. And now it makes perfect sense as to why that is the case. It's not just because it's easier to take a nuclear boring machine and make yourself a facility in there. It's also because there was a direct connection to the other false Earth, for lack of a better term, on the other side. And what it looks like on an etheric level is it looks like source waters, life force, breath, all things source, would normally flow like a fountain from every single mountain. That's how it normally was. Until at one point in time, there was a split, a vortex that appeared right in the middle. And it was kind of a two-way street in every single mountain. So the waters of source would continue to flow, and they would flow out to the other side to power the other side. And then what we would get back is an artificial simulation of creation on Earth. This happened also on other planets. It's not just here. And it was kind of like they took something out and put something back. And this is what flowed throughout Earth, and that's what made your matrix or your simulation for a long, long time. And this came up very heavily the other day because they were expecting something to happen here. So very, very, very early on Tuesday morning, also on Monday morning, and when I say early, that's about 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, my time, we started to see something trying to break through here on Earth. The interesting part is it couldn't break through, and then it kind of discovered that, well, there's a gatekeeper here, and they got to go approach the gatekeeper. So I get woken up at very early in the morning regarding this situation, and its attempt to try to get me to allow it to come in. Well, that, of course, didn't happen in any way, shape, or form. It was like, absolutely not. It even, showed itself in a lot of ways. And according to the system analysis, it seemed like it was trying to pose as false light. And it would like entry. That was absolutely a no. And I didn't really realize at the time why it was pushing so hard. One of the things that was taking place had to do with the fact there was no entry into the material world anymore. That would be your materium, your body. It couldn't break through and pass the causal plane here in our existence anymore, and it was pushing, and it was pushing really, really hard, which was a very good sign for us because oftentimes, and in the past, it would be able to flow as much as it wanted to flow. So it was that very next, or within a couple of hours of that taking place, that we discovered the split and how the flow of source was removed from the planet and an artificial simulation was introduced, coming from Andromeda and, of course, the other side, or through Andromeda. So we took a little trip and an analysis with the system and went to try and find what was in Andromeda. Now, what we found was a sophon, an artificial photon, full of a control and command center that apparently had departed the other Earth and came over to Andromeda and our side and tried to manipulate and start weaving the matrix or reweaving the matrix or an artificial simulation or artificial reality. And this has been something that we have been fighting for, months now, this simulation. But finding the key to it and how it kept arriving here was really important for us, number one. And number two, the fact that it couldn't break in was the most important thing. You see, if you were to look at a mountain on an etherical level, you would see that split. And the place where it would split the earth waters or part the current sea and then flow in its artificial simulation. Well, it looked the same in the financial system and in human computer networks. So we also found this very interesting. And back about about 2 years ago, I talked to you a little bit about a person that was Asian who we called the Maywa, or she was referred to as the Maywa. Sometimes it's also referred to as the Mayflower organization, those that worked with her, I should say. And that Maywa system was the base root of the Order of the Black Sun system. It's also where their clearances would come from. It was also heavily tied to this control and command. So that was, an interesting find. And what it would look like is if you were to smash a piece of glass, how it kind of cracks and the veins aren't always even, and it just looks like a bunch of veins kind of coming out from the spot where the original break was. And this looked much the same in computers. And it also looked the same throughout Earth's veins of gold, where you would see a lot of black and red. And this is the system that they were trying to pull in on Tuesday afternoon and Wednesday. So pushing to try to pull this system in so that they could actually attach cryptocurrency to it and revive the treasury system with crypto. We know we hear a lot in mainstream media about stablecoin, and it's going to be backed by gold and all of these types of things. And this system was what they were going to try to use to do that. The system did a lot more than affect a financial system, though. It also was control and command and backdoors into things like internet and cell phones and telecommunications, and it really gave them a strong connection to human computer systems tied to Andromeda's control and command. Now, the Andromeda control and command was not only in Andromeda on this side of the universe, it was also in Andromeda on the other side of the universe, which is how they kept boring these quantum tunnels through and creating these artificial simulations. We'd take them out, they'd come back. We'd take them out, they'd come back. But making that discovery yesterday also told us how to get rid of the control and command. Now, this has had far-reaching effects at the NSA. It's also had far-reaching effects into the financial system. It's had far-reaching effects to nearly every backdoor that Echelon was built upon and other things were piled onto for quote-unquote security. And that's not security of us in any way, shape, or form. That is security for the elite and their looshing operations and, of course, their artificial simulations in which they're allowed to exist in here. So cleaning that up yesterday has resulted in something very, very interesting that started to happen overnight. Didn't get finished until quite late last night. That's why I didn't get the report out yesterday. But fixing the split that we saw in the mountains, its connection to Andromeda, meaning removing the AI that was creating it, also had an interesting effect this morning. So the interesting effect was source started to flow in its fullness now through Earth and through those mountains. He now is able to create not only through Earth and also through us. Not to say there might not be a few things left out there here and there, but it's going to take a little bit of time for this to fully integrate. I don't know exactly how long at this point, but the other interesting thing that started happening too is, remember, the humans, the actual humans, not overlays on Homo sapiens, the actual non-people walking this planet only exist in this simulation overlay on the planet. So we coexist here, to put it mildly. However, as the waters start to flow, it's almost rolling back that old simulation at a rapid rate at this point. And what I mean by rolling it back is, if you had a piece of plastic overlaying the whole planet and people and everything, as the waters flow through, it's coming through with such force now that it's actually pushing all of those things back. So it will get to the point where it pushes it back into nothingness at this point. The interesting thing that seems to be happening is all of these fake people, for lack of a better term, or artificial or inorganic people also seem to be getting rolled up with it because they're not part of the organic world. They're only part of the overlay. The good news is the only thing that they can do at this moment in time is affect the rolled up simulation as it disappears. And I think we're turning a corner as of today. At least that's the way it feels at the moment. I haven't seen anything where they have gotten a grip in the last 4 or 5 hours, at least at the moment. So these are all extremely positive things for us and moving forward. And I'm expecting something fairly positive Tuesday, Wednesday of next week. Very positive for us.
You know, I'm feeling the same thing. I have been feeling for a while now, at least a month, that something really big was coming, and things are showing up in my YouTube feed now. I don't know if you guys get that, if you watch some other light workers and what they're doing and what they're sensing right now. But there are lots of people talking about this feeling that something big is happening. And I'm wondering if this is connected to what Kim is talking about. I mean, if these beings cannot exist where source is coming into our planet now through the mountains, and they're just, I mean, what's going to happen? I mean, it's not really funny, but I'm just like, are these people going to disappear? Are they just going to like fall over and not work anymore? Again, we're talking about artificial beings. Is it going to be something that our whole reality changes? Therefore, we don't even remember any of this happening because it's like it never was? Like, I have a gazillion questions for God right now. But we all feel like something big is about to happen, right? And it's for our benefit. And so hallelujah for that, right? All right, guys, that wraps up this week's episode of The Rundown. Again, if you want more information about who we are and what we do, visit our website, unitednetwork.earth. If you decide to become a member, then that's going to give you on-demand access to all of our content, including all of our news updates, our New Earth interviews, everything from Kim and her team with the GIA, and all things restoration as we move forward full speed ahead. This is The Rundown, and I'm Sunny Galt for United Network News, signing off.